When I say Kalamity Kate, if you were born after 1967, you know exactly who I am talking about. For 15 years, Lita Powell Drake rocked the leather-looking tassel vest, the skirt, the cowboy boots, and the big hair. And she's written about it, her years on KOLN, KGIN TV, on Cartoon Corral, and the book, The Calamities of Kalamity Kate. Lita, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure, Dale. And the fact that KFOR radio was KFOR television is the reason I'm wearing the Kalamity Kate outfit today.
You are the only person I've ever interviewed for this show who has asked me what I should wear. No one else has ever asked me that before.
Well, I hope you can visualize the big hair and the leather outfit, which doesn't fit anymore because that was 47 years ago. Yeah. I can still get into it. However, I can't breathe and I don't digest and the blood doesn't flow. But you see what I'll do for KFOR radio.
You're rocking the tassels today and the big hair and the braids. So thanks a lot. $10 per show. $10 per show is what you made, right?
$10.
Did it take some tough negotiating to get that $1 per show raise after your first year?
$1 per show. So the next year that I did that, I got $11 a show, and then the next year I got $12 a show. Now, that's progress.
Mm-hmm. Keeping the Western theme worked out when you took over for Sheriff Bill and Silent Orb. Let's give those guys props too.
And they certainly deserve it. Now, Tommy Young was the sales manager at KOLN TV, and he came up with the idea about in 1953, 54, with having a local children's television program. Because remember, there were only 3 networks at the time, mm-hmm. and most everything was live. So what they had to do at the time was use film. Movies that which were shown had to come in on film. It was very, very difficult. Now, the idea is to sell commercials locally. Remember, television is a business. Radio is a business, mm-hmm. and the idea is to sell commercials. So what was happening at the time is live children's TV programs were springing up all over the country. And the reason is because it was cheap, and they needed a local show to bring in local people and local sponsors. So they usually took a person who was already on staff, who would really be familiar with the process. Give them a funny hat, put them in a costume, do a kid show, have birthday parties, have a cartoon package, and that was basically it. So these shows began to spring up all over the country. And Tommy Young, who was the sales manager, decided we should have one too. Now at that time, Bill Hemke, who was Sheriff Bill, was the operations manager at 1011. So he was already there. Okay, you be a Western guy, and then you need support. You need someone who's going to help bring the kids in and pass out the cupcakes and the McDonald's hamburgers and so forth. So Orville Wissink, Silent Orv, and they would not let him speak. And in all those years, he never spoke.
Never a word?
Never a word. And kids, it was really interesting because it was enticing kids to get him, to provoke him to talk, but he never did. He never did. That's why he was silent. He got paid $5 to do the show, but he had to set up all the sets and bring in the stuff and corral the kids and so forth. But Sheriff Bill and he were the stars. And kids were coming from all over the state of Nebraska to be on the show. Think about this. You've got a child who is 5 or 6 years of age who can wave to his grandma in Benkelman, Nebraska, and say what he wants to be when he grows up. It was a big deal. And Sheriff Bill and Silent Orv had a big paddle, and they would paddle each of the birthday kids for the number of years that they had.
That's not politically correct.
Well, I know, no. There were a lot of things that weren't politically correct. We had Kalijah the Wooden Indian, who stood there, and he didn't speak either except for no. This was Dick Iyer, who used to be on the, he was a carpenter at Channel 1011, and he would put on an Indian war bonnet and a blanket and stand there with his hands crossed, and he'd go nug for no and ugh for yes. Now, is that politically incorrect? Of course.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. So they did the show for 10 years. And then at that point in time, Bill decided to really retire and go to the Arizona territory, as we call it, he loved to play golf. And so he left, and at that point in time, Mr. Ebel, the general manager and president of KOLN-TV, came to me and said, "Do you want to, do the kids show? You host the kids show."
Well, what are you doing?
I was
before
already
this?
doing the morning show. I was already hosting the 10,
with
11.
With Wayne West.
No.
Wayne was
Wayne West took ill. And so Mr. Ebel asked me to host the morning show
Okay.
on an interim basis
Okay.
until they could find someone who was musical. Well, I'm the least musical person alive. If you've ever heard me sing, you'll realize that. So I was, there producing and hosting the show and having a good time, but they kept looking for a musical host to replace Wayne West.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently I was cheap. I got $15 a show to host and produce an hour-long morning show, and $10 in the afternoon for Cartoon Corral. So I got paid $25, but consider this. I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get my child, at that time there were no daycare centers, to a person that I could trust, a neighborhood lady. Actually, she lived in North Lincoln. I lived way out in Capitol Beach, couldn't have been further. Get the child there, get the show on the road, and then produce the script for the next day, and then get ready for Cartoon Corral, all those required scripts and formats, etc. And so therefore I was there, well, consider the time, starting at 5 in the morning, I left at 5 in the afternoon, and I got $25.
You're big time.
I know it.
Good thing they didn't take you up on that idea of turning the Western set into an astronaut set. That was your idea, wasn't it? East Cupcake
Well,
County
yeah,
into
I
a
was flying at the
silver
time. And,
spaceship?
I had a pilot's license, and I thought, well, this old corny Western stuff, I could be an astronaut. And
Yeah.
remember, they landed on the moon just shortly before that. It was just very exciting. And I'd have a silver lame jumpsuit and a silver cone there would represent the spaceship.
What did Mr. Ebel think about that?
That stinks.
End of conversation.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that the kids weren't screened. No one was turned away. No rehearsals for these kids.
That's the excitement.
How many
of-
at a time?
Well, 15 to
15?
20 approximately, just enough for the McDonald's hamburgers to go around.
And from where did you get the name Kalamity Kate?
Lynn Graz was the promotion director of 1011, who was very creative, and I owe her everything for having helped me with the book, because she's got a wonderful memory. She went on, she was destined for big time. She went on to KMOX TV in St. Louis, and then went on to the CBS television network in New York and created the Read More About It program. But she comes back. Her mother, Marie Rustermeyer, lives in Lincoln and is so proud of her daughter and her accomplishments. She comes back to visit her mother all the time. So we sat down. In fact, it was 12 years ago when we sat down, and I said, I want to remember the stories of Cartoon Corral and all the weird and wonderful and crazy things that happened during live television. So we sat down and I recorded it. And we started to laugh, we cried, and with her remarkable memory, it brought up some of the ideas and suggestions. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. Because people have been saying to me for years that they remember being on Cartoon Corral, they remember seeing it, and they come up to me all these years later and say, oh, I loved your show, etc. And so I thought, maybe I should do something with this. Now with Lynn Graz's help, and getting the background in detail, I recorded that on my little old GE tape recorder. And I just set it aside for the time that I would retire. Maybe when I retire, I'll write a book. And I've got now some of the facts that I really needed. Well, 12 years went by. I retired at 72 and a half. And I thought, okay, that's enough of that. Now I'm going to write this book. So I turned on my old GE tape recorder, hoping, it was covered with dust now. I had just let it sit there. I didn't pay any attention to it. And I pressed the start button, and it went, and I thought, oh, no,
This is a cassette player, evidently.
Yeah, my old
cassette
cassette
deck.
player, yeah. And I thought, oh my God, it's not going to work, it's lost. And then it picked up a little speed, and pretty soon, there it was. And so then I began to transcribe what we had actually talked about, and now the real work began. And the work began in terms of trying to find the people who had been a part of the show. Now, what happens, and what I learned from writing a book is, young girls who were on the show, most of whom got married, and their names changed. I couldn't find them. Tracking down people, it was a nightmare. And then think about this. The people who should remember aren't dead. The people who were dead, didn't help me at all. And the people who aren't dead couldn't remember. Well, Lita, that was a long time ago. I said, but you directed the show. You can't help me. So I found out, it's not a novel. So therefore I'm talking about real people, real places. I've got to spell their names correctly, get the dates correct. It was very, very difficult. And I'm sure I left out some people. And for that I'm apologetic, but I couldn't cover everybody. And I started with the Cartoon Corral because that's what I knew the best. And it was Jeff Korbelick of the Lincoln Journal-Star, a wonderful writer, who was the one when I was inducted into the Nebraska Broadcasters Hall of Fame 4 years ago. He wrote a big story about the induction and called it a roundup of memories. He wanted people who are now adults to remember their experiences on Cartoon Corral. And the stories that they wrote, when I saw that article, a big, full-page story in the paper, I cried, I laughed, and I said, that does it. I mean, those stories, particularly were the best ones when an adult remembered being on. And so that cinched it for me right there. Okay, now I'm going to do it.
Where can people buy the book? Let's talk about
well,
where they can buy the book.
Oh, yes, thank you for asking. It's available at Barnes & Noble, both locations here in Lincoln, at the State Capitol at the Landmark Gift Shop, on Amazon.com, and I'm most proud of the Lincoln City Libraries. They have copies of the book. And that, to me, do we have time for me to tell you a little story?
Sure.
Okay. As a child, I was a noisy child. I was a rowdy child. I was a loud child. And we had a little library in my school. My school was very unusual in Duluth, Minnesota, because we went from kindergarten to 12th grade. We were all there. So we had a little library, and Miss Alice McClymans was the librarian. Now, I come into the library, and maybe this is second grade, I think first or second grade, and I'm noisy. I was noisy then. I'm probably even noisier today. And Miss McClymans, knowing that I was disturbing the silence, she was Marion, the librarian, shh, be quiet, children. And I'm noisy. She comes up to me and she says, Lita, I've got a really good book for you. And she took me over to the children's section in the library, and she pulled out the Grimm's fairy tales and said, you can take this home. I got to take a book home from the library. I was so thrilled, and I struggled to try to read it, and I would come back to Miss McClymonds, and she would help me. And once I finished that, she said, I got some more. Walter T. Farley and the Black Stallion. And I began with that series, The Black Stallion, Son of the Black Stallion Returns, and I was hooked. And Miss McClymonds would always Miss McClymonds would take me then, and now she gave me The Call of the Wild. And I was hooked. I have been a big reader and loved the libraries forever. And to think that my book is now in the library, Alice McClymans, if she were only still alive, would be so thrilled that she was the one who introduced me and nurtured me through reading, that I was able, this many, many years later, to write a book. That's my blessing to Alice McClymans.
We have more stories to tell. We're going to continue here on Lincoln Live with Lita Powell Drake. Her years is Kalamity Kate. It's in the book The Calamities of Kalamity Kate, a history of Nebraska's children's TV shows. Don't go anywhere. We'll have more in a moment. Lita Powell Drake is with me today on Lincoln Live. Kalamity Kate. Her book is The Calamities of Kalamity Kate, a history of Nebraska's children's TV shows. If you missed the first part of the conversation, go to our website, KFOR1240.com. There we'll have you jump through a couple of hoops there, click places, and then eventually you'll be able to go back and listen to this entire conversation and other conversations with very interesting people on Lincoln Live. That's KFOR1240.com. All right, how deep into Cartoon Corral and your character Calamity Kate did it start to be you? When did it start to feel comfortable and you owned it?
Right away.
Didn't
Right
take
away.
any warm up?
You mean warm up for each daily show?
I mean,
No.
because for example, when I started the KFOR morning show, it just takes a while to integrate into a routine. You're working with floor people, you're working with cameramen, you're working with cue. I mean, you're working
Well,
with
the
a
curious
routine.
thing is, I already had a lot of experience in television. I started in
were doing the
Duluth,
morning
Minnesota, at KDAL television, just between high school and college. I was a night receptionist. And they discovered no women were on the air.
No.
Women were on the air. But they discovered, oh, she can talk, she can walk. And so they asked me to come into the studio. Could they use my hands? Because usually the floor crew were men and they had hairy fingers or dirty fingernails. And so they didn't want to have them use the food, handle the food. So could you do this? Could you show the ice cream and so forth? So yeah, I could do. What was happening as I was doing that stuff as the night receptionist, the only female there, they discovered I could talk, I could walk. Could I do this commercial? I began the IGA commercials. I began doing a little show called the Sat Shadow Stumpers. And then I was the bingo girl. We played live bingo on the air, under the B3, under the I2.
This is in
so
Duluth.
This was in Duluth, Minnesota. Yeah, Channel 10, Channel 3, KDAL television. And so when I came to Nebraska, I was already seasoned. So it was very easy for me to step in. I auditioned for a commercial for Lincoln Telephone and Telegraph Company, and I remember exactly the words, "Nothing changes the miles to smiles like the sound of your voice. Lincoln Telephone and Telegraph and the new Princess phone." So I got hired to do that, and then of course they realized that I already was seasoned in television. So then, would you host the morning show? Would you host? You bet. So I just moved into that comfortably.
And Calamity Kate, the character for you, opened up a lot of other doors and invitations to take part in community events. You only said no twice. Took everything else up for a yes? You only said no twice. What were those?
The Lincoln
no's?
Sport Parachute Club offered me free skydiving lessons. And at that time, I was learning to fly. Bernie Bauer from Duncan Aviation was my flight instructor. A woman, I'm happy to say, she's been a dear friend all these many years. I said to Bernie, the Lincoln Sport Parachute Club is offering me free skydiving lessons. And Bernie said, Lita, why would you want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane? That made sense to me, so I declined that one. And then the Flying Walendas were in Omaha, and I got a call from their promotion people, and did I want to walk the high wires with the Walendas? I said, the Flying Walendas that had that 7-layer pyramid and killed their mothers, brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunts. 7 people died in that. Well, they're not going to kill you. And I said, oh, their families are expendable, but you're going to save me. What about the net? And they said, what net?
Walendas don't use
no,
nets.
No. So but it seems like I said yes to everything else, and what fun that was.
Well, it got you in to see Captain Kangaroo. It got you in to see Art Linkletter. It got you in to see Jerry Lewis. I mean, it introduced you to a lot of very special people.
And to go all over the world. I mean, even though the pay was lousy, the shall I call it the fringe benefits were great, because doors opened for me to participate in so many things.
You went to Africa.
Went to Nairobi, Kenya, Africa, with Pete Zura, who was a big outdoor game photographer. Do you want me to tell that little
Please.
story? Okay. All right. We had a driver. We were in northern Kenya just before the monsoon. The rains would be starting, so it was very dry and dusty. And I am going to shoot silent film, and Pete's going to take pictures, outdoor photographic pictures. And so we have a driver, and we're going through this dusty road, and out of the bush there comes a sparkling of something. My eye is caught over there, and I see that it's a spear. 2 little kids are coming out of the brush with spears. Now, they were wearing that red costume, which is the Maasai tribe, Maasai, who live in those dung huts the house made of cow's dung. I mean, it's a remarkable group. Those are the people, if you don't know them outside, that jump, that do this high jumping. I mean, they're incredible. And here are these two little kids. They've got spears that are sparkling in the sun. And I saw them, and I said to the driver, "Stop the car!" He slammed on the brakes thinking there was some emergency. And I got out of the car and I started to run up to these kids. And I thought, wait a minute, they got spears. So I said the only thing I knew in Swahili, which was jambo, hello. They looked at me, they didn't smile. And I had a gift from KOLN TV that I had brought with me to give to children. On the front of it, it was a T-shirt. And the T-shirt said, "Do you know what turns me on?" On the back it said, 1011 strong. I wanted to put those T-shirts on those two kids. One was taller than the other. They were painfully rail thin, as the Maasai tribe is. And so I took the little kid, gently took the spear out of his hand, hoping he wasn't going to turn it on me. And I said to him in English, which he didn't understand, "You don't have to be afraid of me. You got the spear." And I took it away from him. His eyes are just wide as this crazy woman is taking the spear away from him. And then I put the shirt over his drape that he had. And I didn't do it to the older kid because he looked bigger, and I thought, if he pointed that spear at me. Now, Pete Zura then gave them 3 shillings for posing for the photograph with me, and that was worth about 33 cents, we figured. But so the question is, what did those kids say to their parents when they got back to their dung huts?
Now, you have a photograph.
I have a photograph. Pete Zura took that photograph. Now, listen, there's a fine line between being a saver and being a hoarder. And I think I crossed the line. But had I not done that, I would not have kept all those pictures and all that stuff that provided the background for me to write this book.
Good for you.
So be careful about what you save, though, because it
Good
does.
for you.
The thing is, I didn't realize I was going to write a book when I left 1011. I had just kept something in boxes and stuff, and all I did was when I went home, I just put them in the garage, and they piled the collection and piled up over the years. Had I not had that, I could not have written the book.
There it is, page 43.
That's in the index. There's an index in the book. So if your name is in the book, it's back there, and it goes to page. I'm so thrilled.
The book is The Calamities of Kalamity Kate. All right, what other TV shows? We're running out of time.
Oh, no.
Here. What other TV shows? I remember Cartoon Corral. I remember For Children Only. That was Dale Holt.
Oh, yes, Reverend Dale Holt, Sunday morning.
Morty Mouse.
Yes, I'm glad you remember
mornings.
that. Yes, and don't forget
Davy and Goliath was part of his show.
You watched it then?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Dale Holt's wife. Dale passed on several years ago. He was a dear, one of my very best friends. I love Dale Holt. But don't forget Romper Room, the 7 Romper Room teachers. I contacted every single one of them. That was the part of the research, to go back and try to find these people. Donna Frohart Gailey is the only one who has passed on. But everybody else then provided stories of crazy things that happened during their shows. And so that's a whole section.
Romper, Stomper, Bomper, Boo. Leda.
You remember that? Tell me, dude.
I remember I wanted those, what are those
Romper Stomper, that was,
with the ropes, and you stepped up.
Yeah, those
on
were the
these
Romper
little
Stomper, Bomper
things.
Boo. Tell me, do. Magic Mirror, tell me today. Have all my friends had fun at play?
That's right.
I see Dale, and I see Tammy, and I see Mary, and so forth in the Magic Mirror.
See, I was there for a lot of that.
And don't forget Juvenile Theater with Wayne West, which was on Saturday mornings. It was live, and 11 o'clock, and the kids came in early with their moms coming from all over the state, driving in, and a talent show for kids. So I expanded the Cartoon Corral story because these other stories have never, ever been told.
Well, the 80s was not a good decade for local television. Cartoon Corral went off the air in 1980 for children only in 86. You had Romper Room go off the air the following year in 87. Local programming just wasn't as popular.
Well, no, I don't think it was a question of popular. Remember, television is a business, and this has to do with making money. it cost, even though they didn't pay the hosts very much, it still cost to do a television show. You got to set up the sets, you've got the floor crew, you got the engineers, you got the directors, you got all this. There is cost. Syndicators what they started to do was put together some very, very good children's programs. He-Man, Masters of the Universe, etc. And they syndicated them locally. So they would give you this high-tech program for children for free and give you an opportunity, give you, the local station, opportunity to embed local commercials in it. Now they're getting a highly produced, animated children's show for free, which they can sell to local sponsors. So that's much easier to do than, to do a local live television production. So that began to proliferate all across the country. So during that period of the really, it started in the early 70s. All the children's shows, one by one, the local live children's show, began to disappear. And that's what I tried to do in this book, is to capture what we had at the time when it was local and live, and the things that kids said and did, and they were a riot. Unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen, and that's what made it exciting and fun.
Yeah. Well, the book it's contained in the book, The Calamities of Kalamity Kate, and it's available at Barnes & Noble. You can read it at the library.
Oh,
you can check it out at the library.
And the State Capitol Landmark Gift
that's
Shop.
right.
And Amazon.com.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that KFOR Television, and Jim Stewart, they started it way back, in the early 1950s, 51, 52. Yeah. So you folks really have a history with Dick Chapin. Mm-hmm. Dick Chapin is a salesperson, getting KFOR Television started, and now you're KFOR Radio, and you owned KOLN TV.
Still moving on. We're flirting with our 100-year here pretty soon,
something?
In the next 8-9 years, something.
I'm flirting with my 100-year now.
We'll have you back for that, okay?
How
we'll
much
both
time
be here
is
for
left?
That. Lita, thank you so much.
Oh,
You're a
thank
dear.
you, Dale.
I appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure.
Lita Powell Drake with me today on Lincoln Live.